Okay, we'll go on to our next lecture. The moderator for this session is Dr. Shweta Kanekar. She is a BHMS and a Master's in Hospital Administration. By mistakenly, in fact, I had mentioned an MBA instead of MHA. She is a state quality consultant with the Director of Health Services, Goa. She is also the external assessor for hospital accreditation at the National Quality Assessment System and an internal auditor for NABL. I give the mic to Rob. He's sitting along with our next speaker to introduce him, and they will be presenting an interactive session on the next topic. It's over to Dr. Shweta Kanekar.
Good evening to all. It gives me immense pleasure to initiate this discussion with Dr. Umesh Kamath on practical aspects of infection control in relevance to the current pandemic of COVID-19. So Dr. Umesh Kamath, who is already a known face to the IMA gathering, he's also an infection control officer at Goa Medical College Hospital, Bangolim. He's a nodal officer for biomedical waste at GMC. He's trained at the National Trainers Workshop on COVID-19 in March 2020 and has since trained more than 1,700 healthcare workers in Goa. He is a National Medical Teacher Award in 2012. He's received this award. He's already received Orator of Goa Award in 2016. He has multiple publications and papers in his name. So without any further introduction, I would directly go to our session on infection control today. So the basic purpose of infection control discipline is to prevent the transmission of infection from an infected person to the doctor, from the doctor to the community or his other patients, and from an infected person to the community. Now in Goa, since the pandemic has reached stage 3, that is community transmission has already begun, every patient that walks into a clinic or the hospital is a potential COVID case. So in such a scenario, how can a doctor safeguard himself or herself from contracting COVID in his occupational setting? So I would like to pose this question to Dr. Umesh Kamath, who is already an expert in this field. Doctor, if you could please throw light on this question.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. We are talking about infection prevention control practices. So as to understand how can we prevent the transmission of infection from the patients to the doctors and how the doctor safeguards himself during this COVID pandemic, it is very, very important for us to understand how coronavirus or SARS coronavirus 2, the positive agent of COVID, is transmitted from one person to another. So there are two possibilities. There is some delay in the slides. The slides are coming now, and with the help of slides, we'll be able to. It's basically a respiratory infection. So the portal of entry of the infection in the human body is through the respiratory route, that is through the nose. Yeah, this way. And even the portal of exit is through the nasal route. So whenever a person who is infected, he coughs or he speaks, he laughs, he sneezes, then the droplets consisting of these COVID particles would be set out in the air. Now, there are two kinds of droplets that are generated. There are droplets which may be more than 5 microns in size. There may be droplets which may be less than 5 microns in size. If the droplet size is less than 5 microns, then that disease is capable of being transmitted through aerosol route of transmission. That is, it just the air becomes contaminated with that germ, and then anybody who comes in contact with that ambient air will catch the infection. But with COVID virus, the very important thing with COVID virus is that it's a heavy virus particle. And as the result of this heaviness, what it produces is a respiratory droplets, which are more than 5 microns in size. and such particles cannot cross a distance of more than 1 meter at a time. And that is the reason why, from the point of view of prevention of COVID transmission, we advocated social distancing of at least 1 meter from the other person. So the viral particles would traverse a distance of more than 1 micron, more than 1 meter. So what happens to this is, if somebody is in close contact with the person within a distance of less than 1 meter without use of a proper personal protective equipment like a mask, then that person will be exposed to the viral particles. The second instance is the viral particles, since they are heavy, they would settle down. They would settle down on the ground, they would settle down on the surface of the table, or on the mobile, or on the watch, or on the water bottle, whichever thing which is there in the immediate environment of an individual. And when it settles down there, these fomites can become a source of infection for the other. For example, a second susceptible host coming close and touching any of these infected surfaces, like the watch, like the mobile, like the surface of the table, the hands become contaminated. And when these hands come in contact with your mucosa of the lips, tongue, or conjunctival mucosa, that can become a portal of entry and the infection can set in. Now, once we know that this is how the infection is contracted, now it becomes, it is easier for us to understand that there are two important ways in which the protection can be taken. So the healthcare worker or the doctor can protect himself. Number one is by keeping his hands clean. Because see, in day-to-day activities, we tend to touch so many things. When I entered this door, I pushed the door open. This door handle could have been touched by somebody else. I'm sitting on this table, I'm touching the surface of the table, I'm touching the handles of this chair. So all these areas are not, exclusively meant for me. They might have been touched by so many other people. So if I wash my hands frequently, that is one way in which I can prevent the transmission of coronavirus. So the first and the most important thing is hand washing. That's the hand hygiene. Now, when we say hand hygiene, when do we practice hand hygiene? Hand hygiene has to be practiced in these instances. These are called as 5 WHO moments. That is, World Health Organization has given these 5 moments of hand hygiene. Before you touch any person, you need to wash your hands. After you touch any person, you need to wash your hands. After you are exposed to the secretions, body secretions of any person, wash the hands. Before and after doing any aseptic procedure on the patient, you need to wash the hands. And even after coming in contact with the surroundings of the person, the environment of the person. For example, there is a patient who is admitted in the hospital. You go close to him, you examine him, you need to wash your hands. Even if you touch the bed of the patient, the railings of the bed of the patient, or the cardiac table which is there in front of him, or you are just leaving the clinic, opening the door which is touched by so many other patients. These are the instances wherein you will have to wash your hands. So these are called as 5 moments of hand hygiene. How do you practice hand hygiene? Hand hygiene can be practiced in 2 important ways. The best and the golden way of practicing hand hygiene is by using soap and water, hand washing. Wash your hands for a minimum of 40 to 60 seconds each time. The other method is by doing hand sanitization, by making use of a sanitizer like this. What we do is take a lot of sanitizer in your hands, and then first the ventral part or the ventral portion, the palmar aspect of the hands, then the dorsum of the hands, very important, then the fist on the either side, then you go to the thumb, both sides, right and left, then you go to the nails, and then the wrist. Okay. While practicing hand sanitization, it is important that, now for the sake of demonstration, I have not removed the watch, but if the watch is removed, it is even better. Hand sanitization for better quality can be performed that way. No ornament should be there in the hands, and the hand sanitization is to be performed. So that is about hand sanitization. How do we do hand sanitization? By doing hand sanitization, you can protect yourself from getting corona to a great extent. Because WHO has given only 2 routes of transmission. One is through indirect contact, which is because of contaminated hands, that can be prevented through hand sanitization. That is something that is very important, and that is something that is to be done very frequently. Okay. The second thing that we do is use of a mask. Now, before going to the mask, this is one very important thing. Many people ask the questions like, they have installed something like ultraviolet lens for disinfection of the hand. This was also done in one of the hospitals, and they found the incidence of the keratoconjunctivitis, which is caused by ultraviolet radiations, increased to a great extent, and even the irritation of the skin was very high. So use of such kind of ultraviolet lamps for sanitization of hands and all is not advocated by World Health Organization. The second most important thing we can use is a mask. Mr. Karen has already spoken lots about masks. What I wish to tell you is masks are of various kinds. Let us understand one thing. We are doctors here. We need to use masks for our protection, one thing. Second most important thing, apart from a care provider, we are also counselors or teachers for our patients. Let's not forget this. So when the patients come to us, they also come to us wearing various kinds of fancy masks. So we need to advise them also on the appropriate use of masks. The first and most important thing, doctors have to use medical mask or surgical mask, the kind that we are wearing at the moment. These are more than sufficient for the normal day-to-day routine clinical procedures. N95 masks, or N95 respirators as they are called, they are supposed to be used only in aerosol generating procedures, not otherwise. So only when there are aerosol generating procedures, we advocate use of such kind of masks. Because those masks are not available in plenty. There is a lot of scarcity of N95 masks. Plus they are costly also. Health system may not be able to afford that cost. And even if you're able to afford that cost, tomorrow if the availability is an issue, then there is nowhere to go. And what people have to use on everyday basis in community setting are the normal cloth masks. These cloth masks can be washed on everyday basis and they can be reused. So cloth masks for the general public, normal medical surgical masks, the 3-ply mask or 3-layer mask as we call it, they are supposed to be used by the doctors in normal clinical settings and in aerosol generating procedures whenever they are performed. What we are supposed to do is use the N95. So that is about the use of mask. Now, when using the mask, you have to take certain precautions. It's always good whenever you are opening a fresh piece of the mask, always sanitize your hands first. Okay, wear the mask systematically that your nose and your mouth is covered with the mask. The mask should not dangle around your neck, or it should not, it should not be, half covering the nose or half covering the mouth and all that. It should be there in place. You should not be adjusting your mask again and again, because when you touch the mask again and again with contaminated hands, you're transmitting the infection from the fomites and the contaminated hands onto the mask. You're taking the infection close to your nose, you're taking the infection close to your mouth. That is the reason repeated touching of the mask should be avoided, repeated adjustments of the mask should be avoided. And if at all you want to do that, sanitization of the hands is an essential prerequisite for that. If you do not sanitize your hands, you touch your mask again. That's the most important thing. So hand hygiene before and after touching the mask. Avoid habitually touching the mask. Avoid dangling of the mask on the neck and chin area. Another important thing is best is not to share the mask. And about the disposal of the mask. That is something that is very important. People use this triple layer mask in the community setting to such an extent, but then when it comes to disposal of the mask, they don't know anything about it. You see the masks being thrown on the road just astray. I would want Dr. Shweta to enlighten us on how and what should be the best method to dispose masks in the community settings, and even for the doctors.
Okay, so when it comes to community settings, the people that are using masks, if they are using a triple layer mask, ideally what is done is they can keep this mask in a brown paper for 72 hours. And after 72 hours, they have to mutilate this mask, that is cut the mask, and then they could discard it in a closed bin that has a lid. For healthcare workers who are using N95 respirators, what has done is you have to dispose of the mask in the correct method. That is, do not touch the front area of the mask, which is highly contaminated. You could touch the strings. With the help of the strings, just remove it over your head, and then with the help of strings only discard it into the yellow bin, which has a yellow liner, because this is medical waste. Since there is a scarcity of PPE, that is basically with regards to masks, extended use of N95 is being advocated. Now, when we have this extended use of N95, what is advocated is you can have 7 envelopes, each envelope having a from Sunday to Monday, name all the envelopes. If you're using the mask started using the mask on Monday, then remove the mask from the Monday envelope, use it And at the end of the day, you could put that mask in the same envelope safely in an area which is not exposed to sunlight or direct heat. Then Tuesday, you wear the Tuesday mask, which is there in the Tuesday envelope, and so on till the Sunday arrives. And then again on Monday, you can use the Monday mask, which you have put in the Monday envelope. So like this, you can use the mask for around 8 weeks, that is 2 months. And after that, you have to discard it again in the yellow bin. So this
Here we
was
need to emphasize one more thing, that there is no need whatsoever to sterilize N95.
correct.
N95 mask, the filtering efficacy of N95 mask is because of its electrostatic charge. And this charge is lost when the mask is exposed to heat. That's why, as Dr. Shweta said, please do not expose this mask to sunlight. Do not iron this mask. Do not autoclave this mask. Do not subject it to any kind of a sterilization procedure. Just keep it in an envelope for a week's time and the virus dies on.
Correct. Correct.
This is just to take it on a lighter note, but the message it carries is a 100% true message. Use your mask like your underwear. Do not touch edges in public places. Do not borrow or do not lend to anybody. Make sure it is comfortable. Make sure it's tight, firm. Make sure it's clean. That is, especially with this surgical mask, they should not be used beyond 6 hours. After 6 hours, they become damp, they become moist. They should not be used in such case. If they have any wear and tear, they should be immediately replaced. If they are staying because of the secretions and all, they have to be immediately replaced. So that kind of protection care has to be taken. This is another frequently asked questions by the question by the people. Patients sometimes ask all sorts of. That is, while exercising, to use the mask. You would not be getting sufficient supply of oxygen that is required for you. You use mask during exercise. The best thing to do if you are exercising is to exercise alone. Don't exercise in group. Don't go for Zumbas. Don't go to gym. Exercise on your own. Maintain social distancing. Do your exercise, and then later on you can wear. It's the best thing.
Okay, so now what we have spoken about was about the proper use of mask and its safe disposal. During care of a COVID-19 positive patient, there is a lot of other medical waste that is also generated. Now, how are we supposed to safely dispose of this biomedical waste? This is another important question that is being faced by all the healthcare practitioners. So if you could tell us more about safe disposal of biomedical waste.
Right. For disposal of the biomedical waste, we already have something like biomedical waste rules. As per the biomedical waste rules, there are these 4 important categories of biomedical waste: the yellow category, red category, white category, and blue category. The dry waste and the wet waste, which is the solid municipal waste, is separated from this biomedical waste so that the entire burden of the waste management system is reduced. Let us not forget the fact that just 10 to 15% of the total waste that is generated in any clinical setting is biomedical. The rest of it is just the general solid municipal waste. Okay. So in addition to the normal things which go in the yellow color bin, like the discarded medicines, the contaminated cotton, the cytotoxic drug vials, the blood bags, the body parts which go in yellow color bin. In relation to COVID-19, the parts of the PPE which go in yellow color bin are as follows. The used masks have to go in yellow color bin. All the tissues and toiletries go in yellow color bin. The diapers which are used by the patient, the head cover, the head cap, the shoe cover, the linen gown, and the non-plastic or the semi-plastic cover. So all the parts of the personal protective equipment except the gloves, the face shield, and the goggles, they will go in yellow color. What goes in red color bin is, as I said, the parts of the PP, there is the gloves, the goggles, the face shields, the plastic coverall, the plastic component of the there will go in the red color bin. Plus the rubber and plastic material like the syringes, the catheters, the tubing are supposed to go in the red color bin. Okay. There is a yellow bin, there is a red bin, then there is a white plastic puncture-proof container. All the sharp items will go in the white plastic puncture-proof container, and the blue bin is meant for all the glasswares. So all the ampoules or the vials are supposed to go in the blue color bin. This is the method of disposal of or the segregation of the waste that we need to follow for all the clinics, for all the clinical establishments, and especially for COVID care centers, and even for the COVID hospitals which are there in the state. So that is the system of disposal of biomedical waste, or segregation of biomedical waste.
Okay. So far we discussed about hand hygiene, discussed about the use of mask and its safe disposal. We have also discussed about the biomedical waste management and its disposal as per 2016 biomedical waste rules. Right in the beginning, doctor, I remember you mentioned that
म्हाका एक सांग रेड तूं येलो म्हणटा ते बद्दल
transmission is possible through contaminated surfaces or contaminated fomites. Also, there are many high touch or frequently touched surfaces in a clinical setting, like the doorknobs, the bed railing, the light switches, the switchboards, etc. Even the surfaces of tables or the reception areas, which may be contaminated and which would serve as a probable source of infection. So, what can be done, or how could we reduce the risk of transmission through such a route?
Yeah, Dr. Shweta, I see the point that you're making here. You made it really very obvious. What we are talking about is environmental sanitation. When it comes to transmission of any disease, we talk about the triad of agent, the host, and the environment. So environment has got a great bearing on transmission of any infectious disease for that matter. So here, as we have already said, the things in our immediate environment may become contaminated. The fomites may become contaminated. The surfaces may become contaminated. As you already said, there are high touch areas, and proper sanitation of these areas need to be maintained to make sure that the transmission of the disease does not take place. So environmental sanitation can be broken up into, first of all, general cleanliness of the floor, which is the most important thing, which is touched by everybody's feet. Second most important thing is the cleanliness of the high touch areas. Third important thing is the cleanliness of the day-to-day equipments that we use in the medical settings. And lastly, but not the least, the disinfection or the sanitation of the that is used by the patients in. So going to that one by one, what do we do in cleaning the floors? How do we clean the floors? I mean, cleaning the floor in the house and cleaning the floors in the hospitals, obviously. And for a disease like COVID, when a virus particle is a heavy particle, if the floor cleaning is not properly done, then the virus particle which is settled on the floor will be just driven with a draught of air and maybe carried to different places. So it is important that these viral particles are removed from the floor from time to time, and that's why floor cleaning is very important. First and most important principle, there is nothing like dry dusting in the hospital. Use of brooms in a hospital setting for cleaning the floors is to be totally prohibited, to be totally avoided. That's the first important. If at all you have to do dusting, it should be damp dusting. Using a damp cloth, it can be done. Okay. How do you do mopping of the floor in the hospitals? Mopping of the floor has to be done using a 3-bucket system. So there is a trolley here, as it is shown in the figure. We have 3 buckets here. There is first bucket in which there is warm water with the detergent or soap solution. The second bucket is there with just plain water, and the third bucket is there with disinfectant solution. When we say disinfectant solution, 1% sodium hypochlorite solution is the one which can be cited as a universal disinfectant when it comes to COVID, with some little exceptions here and there. So disinfectant solution meaning 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. So what happens is when the housekeeping staff starts mopping, it starts with the first bucket with the help of a mop which is having a long handle. He first starts with the soap solution, which is starting from the farthest corner in the room and then coming towards the door. He makes swiping movements with the help of the mop as if he's drawing a figure of it, absolutely right. And that is the way to use the first bucket. And then the mop must be dirty by the end of this exercise. So the mop has to be first clean. So it has to be dipped in the second bucket, which is plain water, wring it so that excess dirt is removed, allow that area which is clean to dry for some time, for 5 minutes or so, and then dip this mop in the third bucket, which contains 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. And then do the same procedure, there is a figure of it, kind of swiping movements in the same area using the sodium hypochlorite. So this is the way in which mopping has to be done. In the interim period, if you find that the soap water gets dirty, or the plain water gets dusty, or even if the sodium hypochlorite solution gets dirty because of its overuse, then it has to be replaced. This has to be done, this procedure has to be followed in a clinic of mopping the floors at least 2 to 3 times daily, depending upon what is the crowd that we are in. In a very busy place, It can be done during every shift. That is, once during 8 to 2 shift, once during 2 to 8 shift, another one during 8 to 8 shift. In a clinical setting, it can be done once just before the clinical activity begins and once after the clinical activity is over at the end of the day. It can be done in that way. So at least 2 to 3 rounds of such kind of a mopping is something that is a must when it comes to mopping of the floor. Then moving to high touch areas. Now, what are the high touch areas? High touch areas are the areas which are frequently touched by. For example, if the people are walking, I'm coming to your lift, I'm coming to your office through the lift, then they would be frequently touching the doors of the lift. Then there would be the numbers in the lift which they would be frequently touching. If there is an intercom connection, that intercom would be frequently touched. The telephone would be frequently touched. The door knob or the door handle would be frequently touched. Door knob handles of the toilets will be touched. The keys or the flush keys in the toilet would be frequently touched. The handles of the chair, the other furnitures would be frequently touched. So these are the areas which are called as high touch areas. Now, if you have metallic high touch areas, then it is we advocate not to use 1% sodium hypochlorite with metallic solids. In such cases, what we advocate to use is 70% isopropyl. 70% isopropyl alcohol is well known as spirit in clinical setting. Every clinic has it. So just wet wipes of 70% isopropyl alcohol, or even with the help of cotton on which 70% isopropyl alcohol is poured, cleanliness of these areas can be maintained. And for non-metallic areas or for the surfaces of the reception counter, or the surfaces of the table, best to use is 1% sodium hypochlorite percent. Once again, if there is a visible soiling of the bed railings or if there is visible soiling, then what you can do is wash that area with soap and water first, allow it to dry, and then wipe it with spirit. If there is soiling with the body secretions, especially with the blood is organic matter. In such case, sodium hypochlorite could be used because sodium hypochlorite helps in removing that organic matter quickly, and it aids in the cleaning of these areas. So this is the way in which high touch areas and metallic, non-metallic can be cleaned. One word of caution again here. These high touch areas, since they are frequently touched, you need to make sure they are also cleaned again and again. Maybe every 1 hourly, every 2 hourly, depending upon what is your patient load, depending upon what is the influx of the patient, movement of the patient. Based on that, we need to decide whether we do it an hourly, 2 hourly, 3 hourly, but as frequently as possible, it should be encouraged.
Devices.
Yeah. Followed by that, we go to devices. Now there are so many devices that are used in clinical settings. So I mean, right from BP cuffs to stethoscope, to telephone, to thermometer. So many of them are there. I mean, can you, Dr. Shweta, throw some light on how do we go about sterilizing or the disinfecting these devices?
Now, since in a healthcare setting, the equipments like BP apparatus or stethoscope or thermometer, these are widely used. Now, what you could do is, ideally what is advocated is after use of these instruments or equipments, you have to wipe them with a 70% isopropyl alcohol and keep, like for example, if you're using a thermometer on a patient, after the use of a thermometer, wipe it with a swab or a mop, a damp cotton, which is dipped in 1% sodium hypochlorite or 70% isopropyl alcohol, and keep it inverted on the stand.
So after each use, after each use, stethoscope has to be disinfected.
Correct.
After each use, thermometer, BP apparatus has to be disinfected.
Yes, correct. Then with regards to BP cuff, again you have to use 70% isopropyl alcohol to clean the body.
The metallic part of the BP apparatus.
And the cloth part, which is laundered with water and detergent.
On everyday basis, it has to be washed with soap and water. Correct.
With regards to trolleys or stands, ideal what is to be done is you have to use soap and water. Okay. That is a detergent and water you could use. You could also use 1% sodium hypochlorite to just wipe the trolleys and the stands. Even the
but even better, 70% isopropyl alcohol in such instances.
You can use 70% isopropyl.
If there is visible contamination with blood on the trolleys, then we would use hypochlorite. But otherwise, spirit is best just to wipe the trolleys.
With regards to suction containers, if there is a visible blood and body fluids in them, then yes, you have to dispose it in the sluice room, and then you have to wash it with soap and water, followed by washing it with 1% sodium hypochlorite, and ensure that it is dry when it is not being used.
Even the stethoscope, after each use, every time it touches the patient, it needs to be wiped with spirit, with a piece of cotton that is dipped in spirit, or with a spirit wipe, 70% isopropyl alcohol. Even ambu bags or the masks which are used for oxygen delivery, they can be washed with mild detergent and warm water first, and after that they can be treated, wiped with 1% sodium hypochlorite solution, and then irrigated with the distilled water, or washed with the distilled water and dry before they can be used.
You could even immerse them in a disinfectant like cetrimide hexadin for 30 minutes and then send it to your CSSD, that is your Central Sterile Supply Department.
And what do you do with the sharp instruments like scissors or the endoscopes? What do you do?
Since scissors and all, you cannot send it for autoclaving because they lose their sharpness. The sharpness get dulled. What you could do is you can keep them immersed in a solution that is Sidex or 2% glyceraldehyde. See that you don't keep it immersed for a long time because there is probability of rusting of these equipments. So once it is kept in the solution, before you have to see that it is rinsed with distilled water.
So roughly for approximately 10 minutes is more than sufficient?
Now, in many of the
2%
healthcare settings, what we see, it is just kept immersed there.
Hmm.
So this amounts to a lot of rusting. A lot of study has been already done on these things. So there is a lot of rusting that happens with the sharp instruments. Also, with regards to endoscopes, as you rightly mentioned, you have to again immerse it in 2% glyceraldehyde for around 6 hours or 12 hours, and then once you do it, when you're going to use, again rinse it with distilled water 2 to 3 times.
Yeah, that rinsing with distilled water is very important to remove the traces of glyceraldehyde. And for things like telephones are best cleaned, wiped with 70% isopropyl alcohol, that is spirit. So these are the commonly used items in the clinical settings, and that's why we spoke about this commonly used items. Dr. Shweta, we spoke a lot about 1% sodium hypochlorite, but is 1% sodium hypochlorite readily available in clinical settings?
No, what happens now is during this time of pandemic, that is COVID-19, a lot has been written about 1% sodium hypochlorite. All the guidelines drafted by the ministry also advocate the use of 1% sodium hypochlorite. Now, there's a big question about how do you prepare this dilution of 1% sodium hypochlorite? Now, if you go back to your clinics or your hospitals, and if you see the can that you get your sodium hypochlorite, the main can that sodium hypochlorite, the available chlorine that is written on the can is either 5% or 10%. So if your can that is there in your healthcare setting has 5% available chlorine written on it, and if your desired strength is 1%, then to prepare 1 liter of a solution, you have to take 200 ml of this 5% sodium hypochlorite and 800 ml of water. So once you do this, you will get 1 liter of 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. If you want to prepare 0.5% of sodium hypochlorite solution, you have to take 100 ml of this solution and dissolve it in 900 ml of water so that you get 1 liter of 0.5% sodium hypochlorite solution. Now, this was if the available chlorine is 5%. In case on the can, if you have the available chlorine mentioned as 10%, then what you have to do is for 1%, it is 100 ml of this solution in 900 ml of water, which will give you 1 liter of the solution, that is 1%. And for preparing 0.5% dilution, we will have to use 50 ml of this solution in 950 ml of water. That will give you 1 liter of the solution. Another important thing that you have to keep in mind is this solution has to be freshly prepared. And once it is prepared, if you are preparing it in a bucket, a plastic bucket, see that the container, the lid, you close the bucket with a suitable lid. And
it should not be left open.
It should not be left open, and it should be freshly prepared.
Within 6 hours?
Within 6 to 8 hours. So considering a shift of say 8 hours, you could prepare a fresh 1% sodium hypochlorite solution for each shift.
Another very important thing, Dr. Shweta, here is every time we have been emphasizing the 1% sodium hypochlorite solution for all the decontamination practices, maybe of the floor or the surface decontamination or decontamination of the high-touch areas. Where is it that 0.5% sodium hypochlorite is used?
Okay, so 0.5% is advocated for linen management. Now, what happens is when we are caring for a COVID-19 patient, there is a linen that, the linen that is placed on the mattress is a source of contamination, infectious source. So what you have to do is you have to manage this linen very well. Now, when we talk about linen management, most important is wearing gloves and also wearing mask is very mandatory. So PPE is mandatory. Also, when you are removing the linen, when you are stripping the linen, it should be done very gently. You just have to roll the linen without agitation, or there has to be minimal agitation whatsoever possible. One also has to ensure that you do not hold the linen very close to your body, carry it away from your body, and see that you, at the point of the bed, from where you are removing the linen from the bed, keep it in a plastic, this waterproof bag or a container there itself. Like it is widely seen when we go on rounds that the linen that is removed from the bed is carried from one bed to the area where all this washing or soaking takes place of the linen. So which is not advocated.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it is also seen in many instances that if in one cubicle there are 6 beds, then all the linen from each bed is taken and it is kept in the middle of that cubicle on the floor. And then finally somebody comes and lifts it up very close to his chest. This linen is all near and dear to it, and then carries it to the bathroom. These kinds of things are not to be advocated. They are against the principles of the quality and the infection control, and they are harmful also for the person who is dealing with such kind of practice.
Yeah, correctly said. So what next you have to do is, once you have taken this linen, you have to either keep it in your container or in a waterproof bag. And then you take it to the area where you are going to soak it in 0.5% sodium hypochlorite solution. How to prepare 0.5 we have already discussed.
Reason?
So 0.5, again, you could go through the slide, 5% and 10%. For 5%, 100 ml in 900 ml water. And if it is 10%, 50 ml in 950 water. So soak it in 0.5% sodium hypochlorite solution for 20 to 30 minutes.
Only?
Yeah, only 20 to 30 minutes. Otherwise, it affects the linen. And then what you could do is you could remove it from this solution and keep it in detergent and water if it is manual washing. If it is machine wash, then of course you transport it to your laundry, wherein there is a hot cycle that is run, which is 60 to 90 degrees centigrade. So this is how linen ideally has to be managed.
Right.
Okay. So far, doctor, we have discussed all the points of practical significance in our day-to-day practice. Now, considering the rise of COVID positive cases in our state, one of the strategies that the ministry has adopted is to encourage home-based care for asymptomatic and mild cases of COVID-19. Now, in such circumstances, I believe the healthcare practitioners will definitely be flooded with questions from their patients as to what has to be exercised during such home isolation. So if you could throw light on the do's and don'ts of home isolation, it would be great.
First of all, let us understand conceptually what is the difference between quarantine and isolation. These two terminologies may look similar, but they are really different from one another. Now, when we say the concept of quarantine is applicable to apparently healthy people, and the concept of isolation is applicable to people who are suffering from a particular disease. Okay, so suppose if I am suffering from COVID-19 and I am a case, I have to be isolated. My family members who have been in contact with me, who have been in touch with me, they are not suffering from any disease. They are just my contact. So that's why they would not be isolated, but they would be quarantined. So quarantine is for contacts and isolation is for the person who is suffering from the disease. As you have rightly said, the number of cases is increasing with no limits, with no top limit to it. We are falling short of bed. There is shortage of health manpower, and as a result of that, wise decision has been taken that the mild cases have to be managed in the household settings. The people who are asymptomatic, people who are having many mild disease will have to be managed in the household setting. Now, how is that going to be done? To do that, the first and the most important thing is to undergo a home quarantine or to undergo home isolation. First of all, there has to be adequate facility. There has to be facility wherein the person can be placed separately in the house away from his all other relatives. Separately meaning he should have a separate room which he can occupy. There has to be a separate washroom for that person. Because what happens is washroom becomes an enclosed space with relatively poor ventilation. So as a result of that, and it's a relatively narrow space. So if it is used by too many people, then the air in the washroom may be saturated with the COVID virus, and the next person using the washroom may be exposed to the high concentration of the virus in the ambient air. That is the reason why the washroom has to be different. So if this kind of a facility cannot be provided in the house, then there is no possibility of a home quarantine or a home isolation for that person. Another important thing is if suppose I am a patient, I am isolated at my own house, so there should be a facility to quarantine my family members in the same house. Otherwise, if my family members cannot be quarantined in that house, then it is best that I go for a hospital isolation rather than home isolation. There has to be a 24/7 facility of a caregiver. Now, who becomes a caregiver? You don't have to buy, borrow, steal a caregiver from outside. One of the members in the family has to adopt that responsibility of caregiver for this person. Because see, there are day-to-day requirements. The person who is isolated is restricted to one particular room. So from that particular room, he cannot go out again and again. He cannot go out to prepare his meal. He cannot go out to wash his utensils. So all these services have to be made available to him at the doorstep, the room in which he is staying. So from that, plus there is another important thing. The person who is suffering from the infection, if you just put him alone, like say kind of Sazai Kalapani, then what will happen is he will go in a psychological turmoil. There will be a lot of depression in that patient. So this entity also has to be taken care of. So there has to be an exposure to another human being who can understand his problems, to whom he will tell what are his issues. So that's why the need of that caregiver is something that is. So that's why this caregiver has to be there. This caregiver also has to monitor the health of this person who is isolated or who is quarantined, and should be in a constant touch with the health authorities to inform them if there is untoward incidents that are taking place as regards to the health of this particular person. Another important thing is exiguous prophylaxis. A lot of questions have been raised about hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis, but let us, if you stick to the guidelines, hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis is something that is advocated. Now here we are talking about exiguous prophylaxis in a home setting. So all the family contacts of the person who is suffering from COVID have to be administered exiguous prophylaxis. Especially the caregiver who has been appointed for that person, who has been identified that person, has to take exiguous prophylaxis. And this hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis has to be given, it is given for 3 weeks continuously. The first dose is like 2 tablets in the morning, 2 tablets in the night, of 200 milligram. So that 400 milligram twice a day, followed by repeat 400 milligram dose on week 2 and another 400 milligram dose on week 3. So such kind of a 3 weeks kind of prophylaxis is given to every family member, especially the caregiver. This kind of prophylaxis has to be given. The caregiver has to be on the lookout for these things in the person who is suffering from COVID to decide whether this patient requires an urgent medical attention. For example, difficulty in breathing. If there is an oximeter in the house, oximeter is a portable instrument. Many people have it in the house. If partial pressure of oxygen saturation drops down to less than 95%. If there is a persistent pain, pressure in the chest, mental confusion, slurred speech, seizures, weakness, numbness in the limbs, cyanosis. So hypoxemic features in other words. So when these things are there, such patient needs a medical care. So medical care, that does not mean that the patient has to be just lifted and transferred to the hospital. We have to inform the hospital, and then some kind of arrangement would be made to transfer this patient. Because the COVID patient, there is a strict protocol for transfer of COVID patient from one place to another, cannot be transferred in any vehicle, and the vehicle in which the person is transferred again has to be sanitized and disinfected. So taking that into consideration, hasty decisions should not be taken as far as the transfer of the patient is concerned. It is very much mandatory that whenever the patient is quarantined in the house or say isolated in the house, all the time he has to be wearing a triple layer mask. There is no need for this person to wear N95 mask, but triple layer mask is something that is available. Triple layer mask has to be discarded after 8 hours of use because it becomes damp and it cannot be used beyond that. When it comes to discarding, discard it in a yellow bag. If the government of Goa, the people take undertaking that I want to be home isolated, they give him a kit, and that kit, one of the constituents of the kit is a yellow color bag. So if that yellow color bag is there, then that every used triple layer mask has to be discarded in that yellow color bag. This person who is isolated has to stay away from his family members, especially the vulnerable groups, the pregnant woman, children less than 10 years of age, the elderly people who are more than 60 years, people with diabetes, renal failure, hypertension, people with chronic disorders like neoplastic disease, people with bronchial asthma. So this kind of people, they have to be away from. Okay. So that's what we are saying. So unless there is a definite kind of an arrangement in the house wherein this person can isolate himself from all these individuals, home isolation decision should not be taken. Good nutrition, adequate rest for these people. Ultimately, it's a viral illness. Hydration and rest can do wonders in such kind of illness. Practicing proper respiratory etiquettes. That is, you should not cough in open, sneeze in open, because with every bout of cough and sneeze, you would be discharging millions and millions of viral particles in the air. So whenever he has to cough, sneeze, that has to be in the cup of the hands, or that is also not good. Even if cup of the hands are used, then proper hand sanitization, hand hygiene after that should be practiced. Ideally, in a tissue paper or in a handkerchief has to be for washing. This has to be done. If there is no access to all these things, then at least in the flexor aspect of the elbow, the sling of his arm, this person has to cough or sneeze. Proper hand sanitization. If whenever this person touches his nose, mouth, hand sanitization has to be practiced. If this person has to touch any other object, hand sanitization. Proper surface decontamination. The room in which this person is staying has to be the floor mopping using 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. The cleaning of the furniture using 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. Cleaning of the metallic surfaces using 70% isopropyl alcohol. All these things are important. Food has to be served for this person from time to time. The utensils have to be kept separate. The linen of this person has to be kept separate. The utensils have to be washed with normal soap and water. No 1% sodium hypochlorite or isopropyl alcohol is required for the utensils. It can be just normal with normal soap and water. If at all you want to make use of disposable paper cups or disposable plates for this person, after this person finishes his food, the leftover food is not biomedical waste. It has to be just disposed in a green color bag, and the plates and cups, the disposable plates, the disposable cups have to be disposed in a black color bin. So there is no need to make biomedical waste out of it. It is a general solid municipal waste and has to be dealt with accordingly. The linen of this person, the towel that is used, the clothes of this person have to be first soaked, as we have already emphasized, in 0.5% sodium hypochlorite solution, followed by washing in warm water at 60 to 90 degrees centigrade. If it's a machine wash, even better, and then dried in sun. So that these are the basic minimum precautions that the person who is quarantined or isolated at home must take so as to minimize the transmission of infection to his family. Quarantine or isolate till when? Isolation until 10 days after the illness, and it is mandatory that the person should remain afebrile or asymptomatic for the period of minimum of 3 days, after which the decision on quarantine or release from isolation can be taken. Once this decision of release from isolation has to be taken by the health. The patient should not decide for themselves whether I am fit to relieve myself from isolation or not. No. The health authorities would come, they would pay surprise visits, they would be in constant touch with the caregiver, and based on the information that is given by the caregiver, they would act. Okay. So that is about home isolation. Yes.
So I think, Doctor, we have come to the end of the presentation. Whatever topics or aspects we had to discuss with regards to infection prevention and control have already been dealt with in detail. The members, I think, have posted few questions. So I will just see the questions and we could then answer them one by one.
I could mute by post. Can you hear me, Dr. Umesh?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Dr. Umesh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Dr. Afzal, please.
Yeah, you can, just to help, I have chosen the first question from the lots that members have asked. What is your opinion on sanitization procedure used by the fire services when they sanitize large areas?
Sanitization of the public places, Dr. Shweta, you can correct me if I'm wrong. sanitization of the public places using any kinds of disinfectants is not advocated in any of the ministry guidelines. So use of fire brigades for sanitization of parks and other places is not advocated. It is a basic C. Environmental decontamination consists of surface decontamination, decontamination of high temperature, disinfection, and the normal use of cleansing sanitization. Outside that, large scale disinfection of public places is not advocated.
It's not advocated and not documented also in any of the ministry guidelines.
And moreover, they have said that it is not safe. In many places, people have come up with kind of tunnels through which they have to enter some buildings and all that thing, in which sodium hypochlorite are put, and that their body is sprinkled with all these things. So these things have caused a lot of side effects, a lot of adverse reactions among the recipients of such kind of interventions. So they are not advocated by the ministry.
Yeah, over to you, Dr. Shweta. Over to you.
Yeah. I have a question here which says,
Aircraft, what is used in the aircraft as a spray? Most of the times they use colloidal silver with hydrogen peroxide is used.
okay, there's a question which says if we have a can of sodium hypochlorite wherein the available chlorine is 4 to 8%, then how do we prepare 1% sodium hypochlorite dilution?
Would you like to answer that question? 4 to 8%, see, anything less than 10% if it is there, take it on the lesser side. Regard it as 5%.
Correct. You could take 5%.
5% and then prepare solution.
And accordingly, what we have shown in the slide, 5% considering available chlorine, you could prepare 1% and 0.5%.
So to prepare 1% solution out of 5%, you have to take 200 ml of this 5% available chlorine and 800 ml of water, so that you get 1% solution, 1 liter of 1% sodium hypochlorite solution.
Okay,
It's always good to err on the safer side.
There's another question which says, what is advised for breastfeeding mothers? Should the baby be isolated from mother and started on supplementary feeding?
Frankly speaking, there is no absolute contraindication for breastfeeding. Even in settings like HIV, when there is a real risk, there is almost 25 to 30% risk of transmission of the virus through the breast milk. Even in such instances, there is, we don't advocate a woman to stop breastfeeding. So there is no question separating the mother from the baby. The only thing is the mother has to use equipment, in the sense he has to use a mask, not to safeguard herself, but to prevent the transmission of infection. During breastfeeding, the mother's expired air, the child come very close to one another. So because of that positioning, the mother has to use the mask at all times. Another important thing, before touching the baby, proper hand sanitization, preferably hand washing with soap and water. Because what happens when you sanitize the hand, the traces of isopropyl alcohol always remain on the hand, and then with those isopropylated hands, if you are touching the sensitive skin of the baby again and again, it would not be advisable. So hand washing with soap and water frequently and use of mask by the mother is something that would be advisable. Connect to it.
No, that is no. Another interesting question that has come from the doctor is, once they come home from their respective healthcare setting areas, whether they have to rinse their clothes in detergent, in Dettol, or only hypochlorite is advisable. In short, what is the right way to disinfect the clothes that they wear to work?
If you can disinfect it with 0.5% sodium hypochlorite solution, there is nothing like it. That is something that is more than sufficient. But if you're just talking about a doctor who has come from the hospital and he has taken adequate precautions while dealing with his patients in the hospital, even just simple washing of these clothes with hot water and detergent is something that is more than sufficient. What is most important is, once you enter the house, don't mingle with any of the family members unless you have removed your clothes and put them for washing, and unless you have taken a normal bath.
Also, another interesting question is, what are your thoughts about disposal of biomedical waste generated in a home isolation setting? Should used masks by patients be disinfected before disposal?
Dr. Shweta, the waste that is generated by the person who is in a home isolation, we have already discussed this issue. Actually. I mean, what is the kind of the waste that is generated? The person would be eating food, so there will be leftover food. If he is something like biscuits, he has taken some juice, water, then there will be empty water bottle, there will be empty Tetra Pak. So all this is dry waste. It will go in dry waste. If there is a leftover food, it will be a wet waste. It will go in the green color. The only biomedical waste that this person would be generating, number one, is his used mask. Secondly, if there are toiletries, that is used tissue papers. Okay, so this used mask, used tissue papers, there is an access to yellow color bag, and if the urban local body visits the house on everyday basis to collect this yellow color bag, then these things can be put in yellow color bags and effectively tied and handed over to the urban local body, whoever comes at the village panchayat. If that facility is not there, wherein the yellow bag is provided and the people of municipality or the village panchayat come to collect this biomedical waste from you, then what can be done is all the masks, as you have already said this right in the beginning of this session, is these masks can be just stored in a plastic bag for the period of 72 hours. Yes, or a brown packet for the period of 72 hours. There is nothing specific about the brown color of the packet, any packet for that matter, for the 72 hours. At the end of 72 hours, we assume that the virus has died. Then you have to mute it. You can just cut it into two so that it should not be reused. That is the basic purpose. And after that, it can be disposed in the black color bag. So it becomes a general solid municipal waste. As far as the other toiletries like the napkins, the tissue papers are concerned, if the again facility for yellow bag is not there, then they can be just put on fire.
Regarding food waste, whether it be considered as a biomedical waste. So here, I think as per MHA guidelines, the fourth revision from the CPCB, it says
Central
that
Pollution Control Board.
It says that the food waste is not to be considered as biomedical waste and should not be disposed in yellow color bag, and it should be again disposed in the green color bag.
You, Dr. Pesh, I'm sorry. It was a brilliant lecture covering most pertinent and most practical points that most of us wanted. They may sound silly at times, but they are things that make all the difference in our daily lives. Now, I'll just take two questions that many people have been asked. I'll post it as the last questions for the day, okay, for your session. The first question being, members have asked that who have recommended isopropyl alcohol particularly and not ethanol, though ethanol is far cheaper. So is there any particular reason for that? And second question being, HCQS has now, there are many conclusive studies showing is favipiravir better option for pre-infective prophylaxis.
Doctor, answer? Yeah. As far as the question pertaining to ethanol use is concerned, see, what we are doing here, we are putting the ministry guidelines. Not come across any guidelines which advocates the use of ethanol over isopropyl. 70% isopropyl alcohol is advocated as a disinfectant. Use of ethanol as a disinfectant is something that is not seen. I mean, it's not advocated earlier also. Ethanol used to be used in variety of laboratories, but then there is a potential of its misuse rather than use. I mean, they're consuming ethanol and all those things. So that's why maybe people stopped using it in the clinical settings. So all these guidelines which have come 70% isopropyl alcohol, that is spirit, and that's why we have spirit. The second question I could not hear properly because of some problem.
Okay, it is with HCQS now showing no effect on prophylaxis, is favipiravir a better option for prophylaxis.
Yeah, World Health Organization has made a clear statement that there is no drug which can prevent you from getting COVID-19 infection. There is no role of chemoprophylaxis in COVID-19 statement that is made by World Health Organization. But once again, after due deliberation and based on the evidence that is available, ICMR proposed that hydroxychloroquine should be used. Its exact efficacy is debatable. But then, if ICMR is advocating it, I think we are here to follow the guidelines that we given by ICMR. So we advocate this.
Okay. So I thank Dr. Ume for a wonderful lecture. It was simple, lucid, very relevant, and has answered actually most of the questions that came through the session have been answered by you in your most instructive session, a very lively session. I thank you for having accepted our invitation. I also thank Dr. Shweta for accepting our invitation and making the time to come for this lecture. I thank you both on behalf of Amit Tiswadi.
I would like to personally thank Dr. Shweta for being modest enough to moderate this session. Because with the expertise Dr. Shweta has in infection control, she should have been the speaker for this session. But she.
I thank her. I indeed thank her.
Thank you for that.
And I now announce this session closed, so you all can take a break. And all my dear viewers, we'll take a 2-minute break, and we'll be back to the last lecture for the day on microbiology of coronavirus or the SARS-CoV-2. 2 minutes and I'll be back.
I would just like to add a thing, if I'm allowed to.
A concluding remark.
Yeah.
So one of the great lessons that I have learned from all the previous outbreaks, that is Ebola, may it be MERS, may it be SARS, may it be the current pandemic that we are all facing. One of the important lessons that we have to take home or a learning is pandemics will come and pandemics will go. We all have to face it. But what has to stay is improved infection control practices. That is one thing that we have to harp upon and see that we have updated or upgrade ourselves on the infection control practices, because this is a very important indicator that is being seen or currently being considered for all the accreditations, may it be NIH, NABL, infection prevention and control practices that are being done in a hospital. So is a very important indicator for surpassing or getting through these accreditations.
Certainly.
So I request all to upgrade or update themselves, and this is a take-home message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.